It was upon a warm afternoon in late September, the sort of deceptive warmth London employs to lull its citizens into a false sense of security, that I first sensed the disturbance which would soon unsettle not merely Baker Street, kindness, but my own understanding of nature itself. Holmes and I were seated opposite one another in our familiar sitting room at 221B. The windows open to permit the hesitant sunlight to mingle with the ever-present aroma of pipe tobacco. Holmes reclined in his armchair with that deceptive languor which so often preceded intense mental exertion. His long fingers steepled beneath his chin, grey eyes unfocused yet acutely aware of everything. Garaging. I, for my part, was attempting to read the morning paper, though my attention wandered repeatedly to my friend's peculiar stillness.
You were holding the paper upside down, Watson, and you had been pretending to read the same paragraph for precisely 4 minutes and 17 seconds, which suggests that your mind is elsewhere entirely.
I laid the paper aside with a rueful smile, for it was useless to conceal anything from Holmes. Once his attention had fixed upon you, I remarked that London felt unusually restless, though I could scarcely articulate why, and that such a mood often presaged trouble.
An excellent observation, though incomplete, my dear Watson. City is indeed restless, but not from human causes alone. There are disturbances which leave no footprint and commit no crime, yet they ripple outward through society all the same.
I confess that his words struck me as theatrical, even for Holmes, and I laughed lightly, suggesting that perhaps he had been indulging too deeply in abstruse scientific journals.
On the contrary, Watson, I have been observing milk curdling prematurely in 3 separate households, dogs refusing to cross certain streets, and a curious failure of gas lamps along a narrow corridor from Limehouse to Clerkenwell. Such effects require a cause, and I assure you it is not coincidence.
Before I could press him further, there came a sharp rap at the door, delivered with such urgency that even Mrs. Hudson paused in her ascent of the stairs. Holmes was on his feet at once, the languor gone like mist before the sun.
If I am not mistaken, our visitor will be connected to the docks. We'll smell faintly of brine and engine oil, and will attempt to understate his fear by adopting an officious tone.
Moments later, Inspector Gregson of Scotland Yard was ushered into the room, his coat unbuttoned, and his expression strained despite his effort to appear brisk and businesslike.
Holmes, I am glad to find you at home, though I wish my errand were of a more ordinary nature. There have been incidents along the river which defy any rational explanation we possess.
Pray sit, Inspector, and begin at the point where rational explanation failed you most completely, for that is invariably where the truth resides.
Gregson seated himself heavily and recounted a series of reports from dock workers who claimed to have seen a figure moving with unnatural swiftness along the Thames at night, its form obscured by fog yet emitting a faint luminescence like foxfire upon rotting wood.
Men have resigned rather than returned to their posts. Holmes, Hams, and those who remain speak of a sound like metal grinding beneath water, though no vessel is present. We have searched, of course, and found nothing.
Nothing visible, Inspector, which is a very different matter. You have brought this to me, not because you believe the men delusional, but because you yourself heard something which unsettled you.
Gregson's silence was answer enough, and I saw in his eyes that same reluctant fear I had witnessed in soldiers on the battlefield when confronted by an unknown enemy.
I heard it at Wapping, Holmes, just before dawn. It was as though the river itself groaned, and for a moment the air tasted of copper. I have no wish to repeat the experience.
Then you have done wisely in seeking me out. This matter is not one for force, but for understanding. Watson, fetch my notebook and the smaller revolver, if you please.
I obeyed at once, though I confess that the mention of a revolver gave me pause, for Holmes rarely armed himself unless he anticipated genuine peril. As I handed him the items, I ventured to ask whether he believed the disturbance to be the work of some new criminal contrivance.
Criminal, perhaps, but not human in origin, Watson. There are laws beyond those we habitually observe, and London has an unfortunate habit of standing precisely where such laws intersect.
These words troubled me deeply, for while I had witnessed Holmes unravel mysteries that seemed supernatural, he had always revealed them to be rooted in human deceit. This, however, felt different, and I resolved to observe every detail with utmost care.
Inspector Gregson, instruct your men to refrain from further night patrols along the affected stretch of river. Their presence would only complicate matters and place them at unnecessary risk.
Is from what, Holmes? If you can say so without alarming the public or my superiors?
Risk from ignorance, Inspector, which is the most dangerous adversary of all. Leave the rest to me.
With that, Gregson departed, and Holmes immediately began pacing the room, occasionally pausing to examine the violin resting upon the mantel, as though considering whether music might assist his thoughts. I remarked that if this were indeed no human adversary, our experience might avail us little, and that I feared the implications of such an investigation.
Fear is a natural response, Watson, but it must never be permitted to interfere with observation. Whatever this entity may be, it operates according to principles, and principles may be deduced.
He stopped abruptly and fixed me with a penetrating gaze, instructing me to recall every account I had ever read of unexplained phenomena, not for their conclusions, but for their commonalities. As I spoke of lights, sounds, and inexplicable sensations reported across centuries, Holmes nodded, extracting from my rambling recollections a pattern I had failed to perceive.
Precisely, Watson. The human mind invents myth to clothe ignorance, yet the symptoms remain remarkably consistent. This suggests not imagination, but repeated contact with the same underlying cause.
The gas lamps outside flickered just then, and for a fleeting instant the room seemed dimmer, as though a cloud had passed before the sun, though the sky beyond the window was clear.
Did you observe that, Watson? A localized fluctuation, brief yet measurable. Our visitor draws nearer, and London is already reacting to its presence.
A chill passed through me despite the warmth of the afternoon, and I could not suppress the feeling that we stood upon the threshold of an adventure unlike any we had previously undertaken.
Make no mistake, my dear friend. This is an investigation first and a marvel second. Whatever walks our streets unseen shall soon be forced into the light of reason.
Thus ended our afternoon at Baker Street, with Holmes preparing for an encounter that challenged not merely the safety of the city, but the very boundaries of human understanding. I could not know then how profoundly the nights to come would alter my conception of the world, nor how close London stood to a revelation it was wholly unprepared to face. Night had descended upon London with that heavy solemnity peculiar to the river districts, where fog and water conspire to smother sound and distort perspective. Holmes and I departed Baker Street shortly after dusk, cloaked and unobtrusive, though I noted that Holmes carried with him not only his revolver, but a curious assortment of instruments whose purpose I could not immediately divine. As our cab rattled eastward, the familiar gaslights grew sparse and unreliable, their yellow halos trembling like anxious sentinels. The Thames exhaled a damp chill that penetrated even the thick wool of my coat, and I could not rid myself of the sensation that the city itself watched us pass.
Observe the driver, Watson, and you will notice that he avoids a particular stretch of embankment, though it would shorten our journey by nearly 10 minutes. Fear, when widespread, alters even the habits of men who pride themselves on routine.
I remarked that such avoidance might itself contribute to the legends now circulating among the dock workers. For empty streets invite imagination.
Imagination thrives in ignorance, Watson, but it does not extinguish lamps nor alter the chemistry of milk. Something tangible walks here, however intangible its nature may appear.
We alighted near Wapping, Tosingvia, where warehouses loomed like dark fortresses and the river slid past in oily silence. The fog thickened as we proceeded on foot, muffling our steps and reducing the world to a narrow corridor of vision. A dockworker emerged from the shadows, lantern in hand, his face drawn and pale beneath a cap stiff with salt. He regarded us with suspicion until Holmes addressed him with quiet authority.
You have seen the lights upon the water, and you have heard the sound that does not belong to any engine known to man. Do not deny it, for your pulse betrays you.
I've seen it twice, sir, and I'd give a month's pay to forget it entirely. The river glowed as if moonlight had sunk beneath the surface, and there was a humming that set my teeth on edge.
I asked whether the figure reported by others appeared human in shape, though I feared the answer.
Human, perhaps, but wrong somehow, Doctor. Too tall, too smooth, and moving as if the water itself parted for it.
Did it leave any mark upon the stone or timber, however slight, that you noticed after it passed?
There was a smell, sir, sharp and clean, like lightning after a storm. And the metal rains were warm to the touch, though the night was cold.
Holmes exchanged a glance with me, his expression one of intense concentration rather than alarm. He thanked the man and dismissed him with instructions to remain indoors after dark. We proceeded along the quay, Holmes pausing frequently to examine the stones, the iron rings set for mooring, and the water it says, which lapped softly against the embankment.
Watson, note the absence of algae upon these submerged stones, despite the favorable conditions for growth. Something has passed here repeatedly, altering the local environment.
I bent to examine the stonework and observed faint discolorations, almost imperceptible unless one knew to look for them. I confessed that I should never have noticed such details unaided.
That, my dear Watson, is because you seek meaning before evidence. One must collect facts first and allow theory to follow, not the reverse.
A low sound drifted across the water, then subtle yet unmistakable, like a distant vibration rather than a noise, seemed to resonate within my chest rather than my ears. I felt an involuntary tightening of my grip upon my walking stick, and and I could see by Holmes's posture that he too had registered the sound.
There it is, Watson. Note the regularity, the frequency just below conscious perception. This is not random, nor is it designed to communicate with humans.
The fog ahead brightened suddenly, time suffused with a pale bluish glow that reflected eerily upon the water's surface. Still, for a moment, the scene resembled some grotesque inversion of dawn.
Remain here, Watson, and observe. Do not advance unless I signal you.
I protested, insisting that I would not abandon him to face such a phenomenon alone. Holmes's raised hand silenced me.
Your role is not diminished by restraint, Watson. Watson! Observation from a fixed point will provide data we cannot afford to lose.
Holmes advanced toward the light with deliberate calm, his figure gradually swallowed by the luminous fog. I strained to see, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. From within the glow came a shape, tall and indistinct, its outline shimmering as though composed of overlapping forms. The humming intensified, setting my nerves ablaze.
Fascinating. Your field appears to bend light rather than emit it directly, which accounts for the distortion reported by witnesses.
To my astonishment, Holmes addressed the apparition as one might a curious animal or a reluctant witness, his voice steady and analytical.
Your auditory emissions are inefficient for this medium. Clarify intent.
The voice, if voice it could be called, resonated within my mind rather than through the air, its tone neither hostile nor welcoming, but utterly alien.
My intent is observation and understanding. You are not native to this environment, and your presence produces measurable disruption. State your purpose.
I could scarcely breathe, for though I had encountered extraordinary criminals and elaborate deceptions, but never had I been so directly confronted with the impossible.
This location provides resources required for repair. Interaction with indigenous life forms was unintended.
Yet unavoidable given your visibility and the sensitivity of human perception to anomalies. How long do you intend to remain?
Duration is contingent upon resource acquisition and structural stabilization. Estimated period 7 local rotations.
Holmes glanced back toward me briefly, and I knew he wished me to note every word, every inflection, for later analysis.
You will have observed that your presence induces fear and economic disruption. It would be in your interest, as well as ours, to minimize such effects.
Concealment parameters may be adjusted. Cooperation requires assurance of non interference.
The glow dimmed slightly and the humming softened, as though the entity considered Holmes's proposal.
I can offer you temporary sanctuary and controlled access to the river's resources, provided you adhere to defined boundaries and avoid further contact with civilians.
I marveled at Holmes's composure, for he negotiated with an extraterrestrial presence as though brokering a truce between rival gangs.
Agreement accepted. Information exchange beneficial. It beneficial.
The light receded, the fog darkening once more, and Holmes returned to my side with measured steps. I found my voice at last and exclaimed that we had just conversed with a being not of this world, a statement which felt absurd even as I uttered it.
Absurdity is merely the name we give to phenomena that do not fit our existing frameworks, Watson. Tonight, we have expanded those frameworks.
As we made our way back toward the cab stand, the river lay quiet and dark once more, showing no sign of the intelligence concealed beneath its surface. But these. I asked Holmes whether he believed the entity posed a threat to London and if we ought to alert the authorities.
Panic would serve no one, Watson. This visitor is damaged, isolated, and logical. Such a being is far less dangerous than a desperate human driven by fear.
The cab arrived, and as we departed Wapping, I looked back once more at the river, feeling that I had glimpsed a secret never meant for human eyes. Holmes sat in silence for much of the journey, his mind undoubtedly racing through implications and contingencies beyond my comprehension.
Tomorrow, Watson, we shall test the boundaries of this agreement. Understanding is a process, not an event, and London's fate may depend upon our precision.
Thus concluded our first direct encounter with the alien presence haunting the Thames. I sensed that this fragile accord was but the opening move in a far more complex game, one that would soon draw others into its orbit, willingly or otherwise. Dawn found me wakeful and restless, my mind replaying the events upon the river with an insistence that rendered sleep impossible. The rational part of my nature rebelled against what I had witnessed, while another part, forged in war and tempered by long association with Sherlock Holmes, accepted that the universe was far broader than medical textbooks allowed. Holmes was already awake when I emerged into the sitting room, seated at the table amidst a curious assembly of notes, diagrams, and chemical apparatus. The air was sharp with the scent of reagents, and his eyes gleamed with the fervor of discovery.
You slept poorly, Watson, which was inevitable. The mind resists paradigm shifts with remarkable tenacity, particularly when they threaten one's conception of reality.
I replied that sleep seemed a trivial concern when London harbored an intelligence not of this earth, and that I feared the consequences should our fragile agreement fail.
Fear again, my dear Watson, though I do not blame you. Let us instead concern ourselves with comprehension, for comprehension breeds control.
Holmes indicated a chalkboard upon which he had sketched a series of concentric circles intersected by angular lines, each annotated with precise figures.
These represent the disturbances reported across the city, electrical failures, physiological discomfort in animals, and psychological unease in humans. Note their convergence along the river and their attenuation with distance.
I studied the board and ventured that the pattern resembled a field effect akin to magnetism, though operating upon senses rather than metal.
Precisely, Watson. Our visitor generates a localized distortion, perhaps as a byproduct of its propulsion or sustenance systems. Such emissions are neither intentional nor malicious.
Mrs. Hudson entered quietly with tea, casting a nervous glance at the chalkboard as though it might leap at her. Holmes thanked her kindly, and she departed with visible relief. I remarked upon the humanity of Holmes's manners as if trivial, even in the midst of such extraordinary considerations.
Politeness costs nothing, Watson, and it maintains the illusion of normalcy, which is often invaluable in times of upheaval.
Holmes then produced a small metal cylinder, faintly warm to the touch, which he had retrieved from the embankment earlier that morning.
This was deposited inadvertently by our visitor. Its composition is unlike any terrestrial alloy, yet it obeys physical laws sufficiently to be analyzed.
I examined the object with fascination and unease, noting its seamless construction and subtle vibrations. Before I could inquire further, a knock sounded at the door, sharper and more insistent than usual. Holmes's expression hardened at once.
That will be Inspector Lestrade bearing news that confirms my suspicions.
Lestrade entered in a flurry of damp coat and urgency, reporting that rumors of a river spectre had reached the press and that certain factions within the government demanded immediate action.
They're talking of cordons, homes, and even experimental weaponry. I argued for restraint, but panic makes men foolish.
Panic makes men predictable, Inspector, which is both its danger and its utility. We must act swiftly to prevent interference.
Holmes instructed Lestrade to delay any official response for 48 hours, employing bureaucratic inertia to our advantage.
I can try, Holmes, but I'll need something tangible to justify the delay.
You shall have it, Inspector, though you may not thank me for the explanation.
With Lestrade gone, Holmes turned to me with a seriousness that brooked no levity.
Watson, tonight we shall meet our visitor again, not as observers, but as collaborators. You will accompany me, and you will listen carefully.
I nodded, suppressing my apprehension, for I had long since learned that Holmes's plans, however alarming, were rarely without merit. Night fell once more, and we returned to the river, this time guided by a subtle hum that seemed almost welcoming. The fog parted as before, revealing the luminous presence awaiting us.
Your return aligns with projected cooperation parameters. State objective.
Information exchange. One. Oh, we require understanding of your technology to mitigate its effects upon our environment.
In return, resources and concealment will be optimized.
The entity extended what might be called an appendage, projecting a series of shifting symbols into the air, which Holmes regarded with rapt attention.
A visual language, Watson, multidimensional in structure. Remarkable efficiency.
I struggled to follow, yet Holmes absorbed the data with astonishing speed, though occasionally posing questions that refined the projections.
Structural failure occurred during transit. Repair requires conductive minerals present in this river system.
Then your presence is temporary by necessity, not design. An important distinction.
As the exchange continued, I perceived not menace, but isolation and a faint urgency that transcended species. Burgers, I asked with some trepidation whether its kind intended further contact with Earth.
This location is statistically insignificant. Contact protocols prohibit dissemination.
You see, Watson, no invasion, no grand design, merely an accident magnified by our own anxieties.
The globe brightened momentarily, then stabilized, suggesting progress in the repair process.
Assistance has accelerated stabilization. Departure probability increased.
Relief washed over me, tempered by a curious sense of loss at the impending departure of this singular intelligence.
There remains, however, one complication, Watson, which our visitor cannot account for.
Holmes explained that human curiosity, once aroused, could not be so easily restrained, and that others would seek the truth regardless of consequences.
We must therefore craft a narrative that satisfies inquiry without revealing reality.
The entity regarded us in silence, then responded with what I interpreted as understanding.
Deception as stabilization strategy accepted.
As we departed the river, Holmes outlined his plan to attribute the disturbances to a novel electrical experiment, soon to be resolved and quietly forgotten. I marveled at his ability to navigate not only the mysteries of the cosmos, but the intricacies of human society.
Deduction applies equally to stars and streets, Watson. The principles do not change.
That night, as I recorded my notes by lamplight, I realized that this case demanded discretion unlike any before it, and that my role as chronicler carried a heavier burden than ever. For the truth, though extraordinary, was not always the greatest good, and London slept more soundly in ignorance of how narrowly it had brushed against the unknown. The following morning broke beneath a sky the color of old pewter, and rubally with and I could not dispel the sensation that London itself was holding its breath. Though the alien presence beneath the Thames had stabilized, Holmes warned me that the most volatile element in any investigation was never the unknown, but the odd to familiar impulses of mankind. Holmes stood at the window of Baker Street, gazing down upon the bustling traffic with an intensity usually reserved for crime scenes. His violin lay untouched upon the table, a sure sign that his thoughts were moving too quickly for music.
Watson, a visitor is no longer the central problem. The true danger now arises from those who believe power is best seized rather than understood.
I inquired whether he referred to the government factions Lestrade had mentioned, or to some other interest altogether. But
Both and more. Extraordinary phenomena attract three types of individuals: scholars, protectors, and opportunists. It is the last who invariably act first.
his words proved prophetic, for scarcely an hour later, Inspector Lestrade arrived once more, his customary good humor entirely absent.
Holmes, I was followed. Not by reporters this time, but by men who knew precisely where I was going before I did.
Holmes gestured for him to continue, his expression sharpening like a blade drawn from its sheath.
There's a private consortium involved now, industrialists and engineers with government connections. They claim the disturbances represent a new form of energy, and they want access to the river immediately.
Of course they do. Fear seeks safety, curiosity seeks knowledge, and greed seeks profit. Guess which one funds expeditions?
Lestrade revealed that permits had already been drafted for an unauthorized survey along the Thames, complete with experimental equipment that Holmes immediately identified as dangerously crude.
Such machinery would provoke our visitors' defenses. Rudimentary though they may be, the result would be catastrophic misunderstanding.
I asked whether we might intervene officially, though I suspected the answer.
Official channels move too slowly, Watson. This requires misdirection and speed.
Holmes outlined a daring plan to confront the consortium directly, not with threats, but with evidence calculated to undermine their confidence and stall their ambitions. That afternoon, we traveled to a convergent warehouse near Blackfriars, where the industrialists had established a temporary headquarters. The place hummed with activity, coils of wire and brass instruments gleaming beneath gaslight.
Mr. Holmes, your reputation precedes you, though I fail to see why a consulting detective concerns himself with matters of engineering.
Because, Mr. Harcourt, your engineers are about to detonate a misunderstanding large enough to drown half the city. I'd prefer London intact.
Harcourt laughed, a sound devoid of mirth, and spoke of progress, empire, and Britain's destiny to master all forces, terrestrial or otherwise.
Destiny is merely hindsight, romanticized, sir. You possess fragments of data and a surfeit of confidence, which is a perilous combination.
Holmes produced the alien cylinder, placing it upon the table. The room fell silent as its faint vibration resonated through the metal instruments nearby.
This is what you seek, though you scarcely comprehend it. Your equipment will not harness it, it will antagonize it.
Harcourt's bravado faltered, replaced by naked fascination.
Where did you acquire that device?
Somewhere your permits do not extend. More importantly, I know what happens when one attempts to force cooperation from an intelligence vastly your superior.
Holmes described, in deliberately clinical terms, the potential consequences, structural collapse along the river, mass panic, and international repercussions should rumors of non-human intelligence spread. Observed the subtle shift in the room as ambition warred with self-preservation in each man present.
You have two options, gentlemen. Withdraw quietly and allow this phenomenon to resolve itself, or proceed and ensure your names are forever associated with disaster.
Silence followed, heavy and uncertain. At last Harcourt spoke, his tone subdued.
If what you say is true, Mr. Holmes, then restraint may indeed be prudent.
Prudence is rarely fashionable, sir, but it is often necessary.
We departed with no guarantees, yet Holmes appeared satisfied. That night, however, the hum along the river intensified once more, sharper and more erratic than before. Holmes and I returned to Wapping in haste, only to find unfamiliar lights moving along the embankment.
They have ignored my warning, Watson. Human impatience remains undefeated.
Machinery had been deployed despite Holmes's intervention, and the river churned unnaturally as the alien presence reacted.
External interference detected. Structural integrity compromised.
Panic surged through me as the water began to blow violently, the air thick with energy.
Listen to me carefully. You must initiate full concealment protocols and withdraw immediately.
Withdrawal without repair risks catastrophic failure.
Then allow me to remove the interference. Trust my calculations.
Holmes dashed toward the machinery, disabling components with precise strikes, his movements guided by pure deduction under extreme pressure. I assisted as best I could, ignoring my fear as sparks flew and the hum rose to a deafening crescendo.
Interference reduced, stabilization resuming.
The glow softened, the water calmed, and the night exhaled as if relieved. Exhausted and shaken, I asked Holmes whether this incident would be the last.
With humans involved, Watson, nothing is ever truly last. But we have bought our visitor the time it needs.
As we watched the river settle into deceptive tranquility, I understood that the greatest threat London faced had not come from the stars, but from the familiar darkness of unchecked ambition. The final night arrived with a solemn inevitability, as though London itself sensed the approaching conclusion of events it could neither comprehend nor record. The disturbances along the Thames had diminished to near imperceptibility, yet Holmes assured me this was not disappearance but preparation. We stood once more upon the embankment at Wapping, the river unusually calm, collecting the gaslights in long trembling ribbons. The air carried that familiar metallic tang, though softened now like an echo fading into silence.
Our visitor has completed the majority of its repairs, Watson. What remains is the most delicate phase, one that cannot be interrupted without dire consequence.
I asked whether the authorities had finally been pacified, for I had heard no further rumors in the press nor whispers among the cabmen.
A combination of bureaucratic fatigue and a carefully distributed scientific explanation has sufficed. D. Men are remarkably willing to abandon curiosity when reassured by official language they do not full. Yeah, I understand.
As if summoned by Holmes's words, the familiar hum rose from beneath the water, gentler now, resonant rather than oppressive. The fog parted gracefully, revealing the alien presence in a form clearer than I had yet observed. Its outline seemed more defined, its luminous field stable and contained, no longer warping the world around it. I felt, quite unexpectedly, a pang of sympathy.
Structural integrity restored. Departure sequence imminent.
Then our collaboration has achieved its purpose. London will experience no further disruption.
Residual effects will dissipate naturally. Indigenous awareness levels remain below dissemination threshold.
I remarked that humanity might not appreciate how narrowly it had avoided catastrophe, nor how fortunate it was to have been spared knowledge it was not ready to bear.
Cognitive readiness varies across civilizations. XO, yours demonstrates advanced reasoning coupled with emotional volatility.
A concise assessment, and not an inaccurate one.
Holmes then did something that surprised me greatly. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture of respect rarely accorded even to his intellectual equals.
You have conducted yourself logically and without hostility. Should your kind ever seek deliberate contact, I would advise patience above all else.
Advisory acknowledged. Your analytical capabilities exceed projected parameters.
I could not resist asking whether it would remember London or us, just departed beyond our world.
This interaction will be retained as anomalous yet instructive. Individual identifiers recorded.
The river began to blow softly, not violently as before, but with a serene radiance that illuminated the arches of the bridge above us.
Watson, observe the energy redistribution. Elegant, economical, and entirely consistent with the principles we inferred.
The water did not boil nor churn, but seemed to fold inward upon itself, as abruptly as though space briefly forgot its usual dimensions.
Departure commencing.
The hum deepened, vibrating through bone and stone alike, yet without pain, felt a strange weightlessness, as though the word momentarily loosened its grip. Light intensified, then contracted sharply, focusing upon a single point above the river's surface. With no sound of explosion nor rush of wind, the presence vanished, leaving the Thames dark and ordinary once more. Silence followed, profound and absolute, broken only by the distant clatter of a passing carriage. I realized then that the greatest miracle was not the arrival of an intelligence from beyond our but its departure without trace or tribute. Holmes exhaled slowly, as though concluding a difficult calculation.
There, Watson, a closed system once again. London returns to its habitual chaos.
I asked whether he felt any regret, for I could not deny my own sense of melancholy.
Regret is an indulgence, Watson. Curiosity satisfied and danger averted is a sufficient outcome.
As we walked back along the embankment, the gaslights burned steadily, and the river bore only the reflections of familiar stars. The following days passed without incident. The press moved on to fresher scandals, the docks resumed their rhythms, and the city forgot the nights it had trembled. Only Holmes and I retained the knowledge of how close London had come to revelation. And one evening, as Holmes played his violin with uncharacteristic softness, I ventured to ask what lesson he derived from the affair.
That the universe is under no obligation to conform to our expectations, Watson. And that reason remains our most reliable instrument, regardless of scale.
I asked whether he believed humanity would one day be ready to confront such truths openly.
In time, perhaps, progress is not merely technological, but philosophical.
I set down my pen then, aware that this account could never be published in my lifetime, nor perhaps in any lifetime close at hand. Yet I felt compelled to record it faithfully, for truth, even when hidden, deserves preservation. Holmes glanced at me with that familiar mixture of amusement and approval.
You will lock this narrative away, Watson, and the world will be none the wiser. That is often the fate of the most important cases.
And so I conclude this extraordinary adventure, not with triumph nor tragedy, but with quiet resolution. For London slept on, ignorant of the visitor from the stars, and Sherlock Holmes returned to his violin, content that for once, reason alone had sufficed to keep the darkness at bay.